Us now is Claire Finkelstein, a professor of law and professor of philosophy and faculty director at the Center for Ethics and the Rule of Law at the University of Pennsylvania Law School. Thank you so much for being with us at this historic moment, Claire. Let me start by asking you, seeing as we just saw Kamala celebrate there, as a woman, what does that mean to you?
This is an incredible glass ceiling moment for all women everywhere, especially as a lawyer. To watch future Vice President Kamala Harris getting ready to step up to a role that no woman in this country has ever held, and especially as a woman of color, is incredibly exciting and inspiring to all of us.
Claire, I don't want to put a damper on things, but we obviously have been hearing from the Trump campaign that they are refusing to concede, that they are going to pursue this litigation in Pennsylvania, they're going to take up other unspecified litigation on Monday. What do you make of that? And is there a threat here that this could drag on for weeks, that the results could be brought into doubt?
As disconcerting as all the litigation has been, one has to understand that it's, in a way, a sign of health of our democracy. If Donald Trump is willing to accept the deliverances of our court system, then in effect he is willing to play by the rules. As obstreperous as he is, as angry and as unwilling to accept the results as he has been, if a court rules against him and he accepts it, then we are still roughly within the domain of the rule of law. My fear is, what if he, in the end, does not accept it? That poses an enormous national security risk for our country if we have a lame duck president who, over the transition period in which much needs to happen to effectuate a peaceful transition of power, if he remains recalcitrant, if he refuses to accept all of the results of the legal challenges that he mounts, and they will not go in his favor, what then? Do we continue to have a president right up until noon on January 20th who has the codes to the nuclear launch, to the nuclear football? Do we continue to allow him to be briefed on all sorts of national security issues? Does he continue to represent the United States when he is not committed to the democratic process by which our country defines itself? That is an issue we have really never confronted before in this country, and it will set the tone for the rest of the country and for his supporters. So it is vitally important that President Trump get on this bandwagon, figure out that he has lost sometime in the next few weeks, and announce his concession. It's also critical that those who surround him, the members of his cabinet, strike that tone which will help him to make that transition. I think particularly of the Attorney General, William Barr, who has been willing to go to all lengths to distort the law in favor of Donald Trump. He now needs to come clean and say that all Americans have to accept this result, and that includes Donald Trump.
You mentioned there that if Donald Trump respects the rule of law, in some ways, it's a vindication of the American democratic process. Given everything that's been said, all the rhetoric that we've been hearing in the lead up to the election, during the vote counting, do you think that the legitimacy of this process has ever been brought into doubt? And I ask that because so much of that is about perception, particularly by Trump supporters. And if you have nearly 70 million people in the country who don't agree that this process was legitimate, then there's a much bigger issue on your hands.
We have seen an incredible corruption of our democratic institutions over the course of the past 4 years. We have seen an attorney general who is willing to use the powers of his office to go after political opponents of Donald Trump's, and to use his power to cut lenient deals and side with those who are willing to help Donald Trump cover up his offenses. We have seen a Senate with Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who was willing to use the powers of his office to engage in behaviors that damage our institutions, such as the Supreme Court and the impeachment process. But now the voters have spoken, and there is no evidence of fraud in the election. And if Donald Trump keeps saying that there is evidence of fraud, he will damage one of the important safeguards that has finally worked in this process. Even Mitch McConnell has called for a peaceful transition of power and has said that we ought to accept the results of the election. So it's time for our system to show that it can work and for all Americans to accept that, however disappointed they may be in the results.
Let me take a step back here, Claire, and ask you about how you think this is being viewed abroad. Because obviously the world is watching this incredibly, incredibly closely, and one of the big bastions of US identity for so many years has been the democratic process. What do you think foreign leaders are thinking now as they're watching all of this unfold?
I think they're enormously relieved, all except maybe Vladimir Putin, because Donald Trump has not only attacked our former allies and sided with Putin in trying to damage the NATO alliance, trying to damage our European partners who have been so important in helping to secure democracy across the globe. He has coddled dictators and really reversed our traditional forms of diplomacy and interaction with foreign leaders. It's going to take a lot of work to get our democracy and our diplomatic processes and relationships back on track. That's not something that's going to happen overnight, but I think this is a chance to start rebuilding some of the former alliances that were so critical. There will be very confusing aspects of this. For example, what do we do with our relationship with Iran? Is Biden going to go back and try to restore the Iran deal that Obama put in place and that took so much time and energy and diplomacy during his presidency? How will we treat Russia, for example, which interfered in our last presidential election, in the midterms, tried to interfere in this case, but was not able to throw the results. So there is going to be a lot of changing foreign policy, and that can't all be done in one moment. It's going to take a very, very good foreign policy team. Biden's going to need every bit of help that he can get from the professionals that I know he can call on.
Claire Finkelstein there, the faculty director at the Center for Ethics and the Rule of Law at the University of Pennsylvania Law School. Thanks so much for being with us in this moment here on Al Jazeera, Claire.